Other museums might.
I just want to open up the floor for questions from the audience. We have a comment from Sonnet that it's 40% of art museum directors.
No, I just think
right.
just in response to
yeah.
what Gail was saying, that art museum directors, there are other museums.
Right, this is right.
Yeah.
I go to AAM, which is all museums,
right.
not AAMD, which is the art museum.
Right. Yeah, you definitely weren't there when we did that job, Tom. Questions? Comments? Alberto?
Well, actually, I have a confession. I went home, I lived close by, and went home for 2 seconds and turned on the TV to come back here. And that reality show was on with the art with Jerry Saltz and folks there. So I was actually going to ask maybe each one of the panelists what they thought about that and think if it's socially helping or not, or what they actually, their relationship to this, because it's coming so much more common to have reality now, art being a reality show. So maybe quickly each one can give their little statement on that.
So my wife was on. So the big question in our household was, how would she look at HD? Actually, good, so I'm all for it. I think on the balance, the state of art criticism in America is so pathetic, and the absolute lack of knowledge of what an artist actually is so terrible that I think that show, on balance, is probably 51% good. 49%. I think it just, compared to what people think artists are, these are real artists, and they are going through the artistic process. I think the worst part is the critics. The artists are representing artists.
Only watched a few. I have a funny relationship with that program because when there were two competing pilots. There was the Sex and the City funded pilot, and what's her name? The actress. Sarah Jessica Parker is one of the funders
of work.
Yes. Well, there was a competing pilot by another funder, and they tried to hire me to be the one who came in and talked to the kids. And I actually took them around New York and introduced them to a lot of artists all over, the boroughs. People who were completely unknown right out of art school, trying to, of all colors and ethnicities, trying to really do something real with this pilot project. In the end, they accepted Sarah Jessica's, her name had greater credibility. There was equal funding to both projects. I think like I think Tom is saying, it's kind of harmless, but I wish that it went beyond the studio cubicle, gallery cubicle, and took artists into communities as real, as just as equal art practice as painting and that kind of thing. So I wish that it expanded its definition of contemporary art beyond, a certain modernist definition.
Right.
I'm sorry, I haven't seen the show.
I know. I was trying to explain it to Barry because I'm kind of horribly addicted to it, not necessarily in a good way, but. Deb, I don't know if you have anything to add about. You don't have to. Why don't we take another question?
I do think that's a good question. I think that, personally, it hurts my heart to watch it, but that's me and my personal problem with it.
You're a purist.
It's true, yeah. The things that bother me about it is somebody who's an artist, right? I hate that you're given an assignment that doesn't speak to actual art practice very often. I think that the criticism is dismal, and it's just sickening. But
you're going to ruin this show for me. I'm not going to invite you back to my next panel. She's right.
I'm still going to say it.
I agree with you.
But I will say, do you know that sound like I'm just kind of like being too nice to Jerry Saltz, but I love the way that he engages on his Facebook page, on that side, and on his New York Magazine blog posts. Like, I love the discussions about work of art that come out of that. Like, as a social media product, I think it's really exciting.
And one, just one other point, which is, so my wife was the curator then.
Right, yeah.
At the rate.
Yeah.
So the day that they walked in, the day after he had been announced as the winner, was the first day that she knew who had won for a long time. He walked into the book and he said, and guards were running over for his autograph, and they were really excited to have the guy there. And he's, super, super nice guy.
Right.
As nice as he is. But that was an interesting moment.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my, and the other thing is, I have to say, time after time after time, people come up to me in New York, to my wife, and say, I never watch TV, but I happen to be watching it. It's great.
Well, I think
you might be a bit hard.
I think the interesting thing about a reality show is that it is clearly not really about art. And this is what really offends, why you don't like it, because it isn't really about art. And once you see that clearly, then you say, okay, fine, it's not really about art. What it is about is precisely about the relationship between artists, patrons, and the public, right?
Sure.
And when I first heard of it, I thought, well, that really confirms to me that this subject matter, the subject matter of this book, is precisely but it is the subject matter that really is gripping at the present time. I mean, there is suddenly a consciousness of that, right? I mean, I point out in the book, by the way, a really interesting chapter on the relationship between energy and culture, and I point out in the book that our awareness of environment is thanks to oil. You'll have to read the book to find out why that is, but in fact, it is due to the oil industry that we have become aware of the environment. So again, contradictions are always very interesting the way they work out. But this reality show, you see, it is a part of the emerging consciousness that the relationship between artists, patrons, and the public is important, and it matters to everybody, including the broad public. Because obviously, when you go on TV with it, you're aiming at a broad public. So it isn't just something that's of interest to the kind of people who are in this room. It really is a subject matter now that is mainstream, that has to do with what's going on in the world. And that really is quite exciting and interesting, quite aside from the quality of the particular show.
Magnan, you have a question?
It's about the notion of patronage. I mean, we've kept completely out of this conversation the elitism and the, Tom is
The 1%.
Tom is completely right that there's almost no other art museum director who would be talking about community activism and inclusivity. There's so much deep, and with it, and revenue. And we are talk about the ambiguity of space, we're also in a gallery which survives on a market. And how much a cultural shift that seems to be happening from the groundswell up is in certain of the nature of how art is changing towards more community-based art, to more participatory art, etc. But the notion of patronage is very much been about exclusion, about creating a very elite group who some are in and who some, and it's the exclusivity that makes people want to be in that little inn, and most of us are out of it. And when we talk about educating patronage, patrons, or we talk about who sponsors exhibitions at museums and who buys and the fashion involved in which artist is up and which artist is down, I mean, that has to come into the conversation as well. I mean, and we sort of, we're all speaking in the same language in terms of values, but that is a driver of what has kept these institutions and art and the public very separate.
But some of the principles to begin with is there is no art without patronage. As I say, the patron is simply any institution or individual who makes it possible for an artist to continue producing. And it isn't only about money, it's about criticism, it's about the whole, as I think you did a very nice description of the cultural patronage that you see. So, when we're talking about patronage, we're talking about that phenomenon, not just of the, of the individual sponsor.
I don't think that's right. I would suggest something slightly different. I think there's consumers of art, and then there are patrons.
Consumers of the
And
public.
they're really completely different.
Yeah, the consumers are the public, yeah.
But I'd like to go back to educating the patron, because I'm an architect. And the disaster of architecture is every client is a patron. And you have to educate them. They have no idea what you're doing when you start. You show them models, renderings, they don't know what you're doing. Okay? And they leap off a cliff, and they put $25 million project in your hands, and they have no idea that this is really going to work out. I mean, it's kind of an astounding risk management problem, okay? And in the end, at the end of the project, usually we're just finishing up a house in Napa right now. 5 years later, the client always says, gee, if I just knew what I knew now, you know, I would have done this, I would have done that. You know, I kept saying, we told you there's going to be 12,000 decisions incrementally, but I go back to the issue of educating patrons, and you keep citing Rubin, but what makes Rubin a great patron, quite frankly, is his ideafix. I mean, my idea of a perfect client is they have this incredible ideafix of what they want. And when they're ambiguous or ambivalent, it's just endless disaster. You know, spouses fighting with each other, you know, all this kind of typical stuff that goes on. So I'm really interested in this whole idea of educating patrons. You know, excuse me.